From a photo looking back to the 21st century, by Ivan Z. Feng. This picture was taken on June 20, 2024, almost exactly a century ago. It's hard to imagine there was almost a century when mailing services still existed even after the internet had mainly replaced the need for writing letters. This period lasted from the first electronic mail, email, in the mid-20th century to the first real internet mail, or mail, in the mid-21st century. Email became popular with the invention of the internet in the late 20th century, when information could be transmitted by computers. Or mail was based on the invention of the real internet, 3D internet or a net, in the mid-21st century, where objects in life could be transmitted by space scanners, or scanners. From its invention until today in 2125, there's no doubt this technology has changed the world, becoming a common object that one couldn't imagine living without. This photo has really convinced me how much technology can change people's lives and conventions. I've seen from the news that Brightday has been developing a similar technology to transfer living tissues via our net, known as living our net. Once this is achieved, almost all vehicles will be replaced by our scanners for people, if you will. I foresee that this will be a huge leap in human history and certainly change the world again, just as our net did in the past 20-some years. Space Incorporated is famous for its research on flying cars powered by anti-Newton, reduction of gravity research. If Brightday's living our net comes first, it may kill flying cars before their birth. But I guess people will still be eager to fly for relaxation. Who knows? The future is always hard to predict. Speaking of vehicles, I truly enjoy the ancient, time-honored cars in the photo. They don't really look like cars, but that's how they looked 100 years ago. They represent an era, the good old days of my grandparents' childhood years. To be honest, these are the years I would want to go back to if we had a time computer. There were all kinds of cars of many brands, and they were driven by a person sitting in the front left seat. Their power source was mostly gas gotten from something called gas stations, just like in booths with gases. At that time, autonomous driving cars already existed, but they were only in their infancy and limited to very few cars, similar to smart glasses in the 70s. As we can see in the photo, all cars still had human drivers and steel wheels. Just like in the 90s when our net was limited to labs and technology centers, it always takes some time for new technology to really grow into people's lives and habits. And you know what's interesting? This transition from technology centers to everyday lives usually takes exactly one generation. They represent my parents' growing environment and my growing environment, respectively. By this logic, I guess and really hope my future children will grow up in a world where living our net, for people, is prevalent. Going back to today, cars have become a lot more uniform. This difference is more obvious when we stand in front of an old photo like I'm doing now. Especially for brands, only two dominate the market. A century ago, there were all kinds of car brands to choose from. What killed other car companies was the new operating systems at the core. It was software that revolutionized the car industry. The two car companies that first brought auto-driving technology to mere mortals, with seamless integration with smart glasses, bump prediction, and high safety systems, finally gained a monopoly. What's also in its infancy in the photo is AI. All modern car assistants with their vivid avatars are based on AI GPT, first invented in the 2020s. AI has revolutionized our lives since the mid to late 2020s when GPT supported video input and output. We started to be able to find PDF content by expressing the meaning of what we wanted to find. Combined with this technology, GPT was even able to find theorems and propositions from all online math textbooks to solve the math problems your math teacher just wrote. It's really interesting to think about it. Before the internet, it was really hard to find information because they had to go to libraries and spend an enormous amount of time searching in books to find what they wanted. In the non-AI internet era, they had to spend a fair amount of time looking for what they wanted from the database the internet provided, where people were still the ones who applied them. Now, in the AI internet era, the internet has a soul, so it does the thinking and finds the best information we need, combining it for us, like solving a problem in detail by applying the information it finds. In addition, the ARNet, which was born in the AI era, augmented our scope to 3 dimensions, which is nothing like anything before, even beyond people's imagination prior to its birth. Honestly, there has not been another real revolution since Video GPT, except for new voices and more natural cloned voices, as well as additional video functions. These can be called evolutions but not quite revolutions. For example, The first generation of holographic video GPT could only generate videos with fuss and sometimes absurd objects that contradicted the description. But now the videos they generate are much more natural, blended with sensory parameters, and can certainly pass for human-taken footage. So the last revolution was still when we could have conversations with our cloned voice in video and output videos by prompts. But speaking of evolutions, the thing that has evolved the most in GPT is logic. Decades ago, before GPT-7 hash, it usually gave stupid math and weird logic, but now that rarely happens. The math ability has really improved dramatically since the company focused on math ability development with the introduction of GPT-7 hash. It's really funny to feel that when I play with an archived AI model, I realize how bad the experience was. You know, I even don't know how people at the time lived with such unintelligent stuff while calling it advanced. Maybe it's because of comparison with better products. Like I can't imagine how I would live in the photos era without all these or net and AI. Maybe I could live there for mere days to explore the freshness of the old days. But if I choose a time to live, I would still live in my time since I belong here. My parents and relatives and friends who know me are all not in the last century. But to be honest, sometimes I do think if I really had a time computer, would I settle in the future? I'm still not sure. Maybe in 2224, people seeing us is like us seeing this photo from 2024. So, there's really no best time, and I certainly hope the best will never exist in human history. Another reason I'm not eager to live in the photos era is because of health. Regardless of what some politicians say, I still think the most giant leap in the 21st century is not the internet but the fact that we conquered cancer with the medicine Kajari, which reverses cancerous cells. I'm not a medical expert but did see how people attempted to cure cancers with radiotherapy and chemotherapy before Kajari. It's cruel to imagine what patients had to go through for what is now considered a relatively minor disease. Having any type of incurable disease to worry about is really not what a mature human society needs because nobody wants to endure the suffering of disease and parting from their loved ones. Even in the picture's time, surgeries by humans were still prevalent. How could they trust humans to operate on their bodies? That sounds really primeval and even a bit brutal. It's hard to imagine that it was only 100 years ago instead of 1,000 years ago. I don't think most people now completely trust AI-based computers with a more than 99% valid rate. Speaking of computers in most hospitals, I have to complain about their backwardness. They still have lots of buttons on the touch screen, like government-used computers. They look really last century. In a time when we all directly tell a computer what to do instead of clicking or tapping on some stupid buttons again and again to get what we want. It's even hard to imagine how people in the 60s could bear one button after another on their computers and even the glasses of some brands. So when we go to some hospitals, it feels like a time computer has sent us to the past. They are almost always decades behind people's fashion. When it comes to time computers, I do think they'll be super exciting products if they are invented and sold. Although we can all stand on a street and let our glasses display its past over a century, we cannot really talk to the people in front of our eyes or shake their hands or change their lives in our history. Chronotech had some experiments on time computers but only got a few trivial results. Most failed. Based on what I learned, they first started with the internet. We can all send information by text to the future and then receive it in the future. But now they are trying to let people from the future receive and reply to their past, our present. That hasn't succeeded though. And likewise, they are also trying to send them to our past via the internet, hoping people from the past will receive and read these emails from their future. That sounds fictional, but if that succeeds, I guess it'll be possible to communicate with others four-dimensionally. That sounds really exciting. Using Drive. Llewellyn's words, what would you think if you emailed yourself to me in 10 years and immediately received your reply instead of 10 years from now? Maybe I can talk to my future self in 10 or 20 years and know in advance what I'll be doing then. But I've heard all such experiments have failed according to their returning data, and of course, there are still no responses from the fourth dimension to their messages. But it's good they are still energetically trying new ways. I think eventually they are going to get there. In addition, I can't wait to see the extension from the internet to the internet. Then that will mean we can not only send objects through space but even to the future or past. Wow. Yeah. If this and Bright Days Living our net both succeed, then it'll be time for us to visit the past and future. That'll be the most timeless world-changing invention, whose impact on human history is even greater than the sum of all past inventions. Because of that, I've always been a supporter of time travel research, and so are my parents. Lots of people just don't get it when something new comes along. They are afraid of anything new that might destroy humanity and eradicate the universe, using their words. But actually, human history has been developed by such risks and bold trials. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been here. We might have still lived in caves. Besides, radical things might well seem very normal in the near future when people have gotten used to them. Just like the big debate about AI around the 2030s, as to whether continuing to develop AI would endanger the human race. And many scientists predicted that the combination of GPT might let it gain self-awareness and thus become out of human control by the end of the 21st century. But it turned out they worried way too much. At least now, AI is not even smarter than an average monkey in terms of innovation, and it has integrated tightly into humans' everyday lives. It can only combine in different ways their knowledge base input by us and then communicate with humans. They never innovate and are really far from it. I'm not a good visionary, but I don't think in the next million years people will create something truly intelligent beyond what nature created using billions of years. Of course, I'm confident that eventually, we'll be able to do it, but maybe not in the next million years, unless the definition of time is changed by the advent of time computers. So I guess when time computers are successfully invented, people will think we're worrying too much otherwise. We will lose the best opportunity to change the world one more time. After all, I've thought of the most significant insight I gained from this photo, which is also the biggest lesson I learned from writing this essay. I'm disclosing it in the last part. We call our 22nd century the modern time, which seems perfect in every way, and people are mostly used to the rules of most things like the running of politics and society. And so when we look back to 100 years ago, we find the rules there were so immature and opposite to modern. We find it even hard to understand how people at that time bore the way they lived. We think they are so unlucky to live in such a bad-shaped world without smart classes and with the official division of people like the obsolete terms race, transgender, straight, and disabled. At that time, these terms were not only obsolete but even officially printed in their census and some types of official surveys, to let people choose and not change freely. I think most people were used to it because if they weren't, then these terms would have been eliminated by then. Finally, we realized assigning people into such kinds of groups that we couldn't choose at will was a violation of the pursuit of happiness in the Constitution, and our society, as well as the world, took a giant leap ahead in the 21st century. That's right. When we thought of uniting people by allowing them to freely choose their ethnicity and eliminating some old-fashioned terms based on people's appearances or inherent cultural backgrounds, society finally started to catch up with science and biology. When we not only allowed same-sex marriage but stopped distinguishing it and finally normalized it, many more people found their pursuit of happiness with much less stress of being different. When it was no longer ethical, or no longer legal in some areas, to ask about the city of birth, and we essentially broke the barrier of gender by combining transgender into people's will gender, we realized the importance and weight of striving for a great future rather than any possibly predetermined destiny. This gave us much more confidence and initiative to shape our own future in such a fair society with much more equal opportunities. Stereotypes related to them were finally gone. As my history teacher pointed out a few weeks ago, now people are used to those around us with any range of colors or physical characteristics without any subconscious distinction. And now people are used to marriage including any sex and consider it absolutely normal, no different than opposite-sex marriage. When such categories became history, some of us started to realize how narrow those past movements were in addressing a minority group's problem or publicly supporting them or saying things like betray their culture. We stopped generalizing or assuming other group members' traits by their group mates' behavior. We realized such groups are part of us and we as creatures rise and fall as a whole. We much better understood the timeless genius of humanity. We are all so much the same, yet each of us is a different individual. The starting point of such positive revolutions was the official cutoff of distinguishing people by artificially putting them into different categories and depriving them of the ability to change their category. Indeed, once we have the initiative and ability to change the categories we want to be in, these categories no longer control us, but we are the hosts who control them. Although now almost everyone takes the significance and necessity of this starting point for granted and rarely discusses it, when the starting point started last century, it caused lots of debates among them, which seems extremely unnecessary from today's point of view. Likewise, I believe even in the 21st century people rarely debated or questioned the significance of Martin Luther King's speech I Have a Dream, but such a great speech even caused riots in the era when it happened, only less than 200 years ago. The fact is, People who grew up in the past age might tend to be more stubborn about their childhood good old days and unwilling to adopt changes that seem dramatic to them. So, deep in their hearts, they might not think such changes are necessary or will give much significance as they will soon turn out to be. That's how the restriction of the times they live works on their mindset. And that's why such improvements in society often take generations to be fully adopted and considered deservedly right in the nature of things. When I think about this, I start to reflect on today's life. We were raised in such a modern society where everything seems perfect. Even though there are controversies, nothing is as dramatic as the elimination of categorizing people by immutable traits or the elimination of slavery. Is it really perfect, or is it because we're so used to it and not knowing what should be changed? 100 years later, will future people look at us as we look at the photos age and wonder, how did they survive in such a society? I don't want to admit it, but I guess the answer is true. And I somewhat want the answer to be true because I want the development of society and humanity to happen. Because in the eternity of time, there's really not much difference between now and the Middle Ages. We think smart glasses changed the world, truly distinguishing us from any past time and qualifying to draw a line between modern and past. But 100 years earlier they thought smartphones truly distinguished them from any past time and qualified to draw a line between modern and past. And 1,000 years earlier they thought steam engines truly distinguished them from any past time and qualified to draw a line between modern and past. Nowadays, who would think the steam engine is a big deal? Likewise, 1,000 years later who would think smart glasses are a big deal? Seeing things this way, we never really successfully drew such a line between the modern and the past. It's kind of pessimistic to see things this way, but in this way, we are no different. We all live in the past if we zoom out to a larger picture of human history in the future. We call our society modern, and in the photo, they called their society modern, and in the Middle Ages, they presumably also thought their society was perfect. However, when I'm about to finish this essay and think about all this, they all are giving me an unruly kind of confidence and courage to change things, to question the status quo, and to break some existing rules. They tell me not to be too framed by the current norms because we know many of them will be obsolete soon. I believe as long as we have love in our hearts, empathy and care for humanity and individual happiness, the rules we break are going to be rules that drag us down, and the new rules we establish are going to be the future. That's how each positive human development happens. And that's how the next big positive human development is going to happen. When they happen, let's not be the stubborn ones who consider themselves authorities to stem their pace, but be insightful ones to step out of our zone drawn by the times we live in and see a bigger picture, to promote and support great changes. When we are not restricted by the past, a much better future will soon happen. Don't we want to see a better future in our children's lifetime or even in our lifetime? The future is not written because our timeless genius, and what's truly lucky for us to live in today's world, is that we write our future, and our future all depends on us. Ivan, May 12, 2125.